All hope in the galaxy was lost, absolutely decimated, obliterated completely, until the humans woke from cryo-sleep. A sizzling of escaping nitrogen gas echoed ominously in the dimly lit Nigian lab as Yaxa punched buttons on the cryopod scanner with trembling tentacles. His eye stalks whirled as he absorbed the shocking readouts. The strange, derelict spacecraft, impossibly ancient, its crew still perfectly preserved after untold aeons. And the species inside the pods, known only from terrifying myths and children's stories for generations, humans. "This data makes no sense, Yaxa," sputtered Zoltar. "No civilization, not even ours, has ever achieved true cryogenic suspension, and humans aren't real, just old tales to scare hatchlings." Yaxa shook his head slowly. "Look at the scans, Zoltar. The hibernation is flawless, the ship is aeons older than anything we've ever found, and the DNA analysis is clear." He locked eyes with Zoltar as he enunciated each word. "The creatures inside are human." Zoltar's eye stalks drooped as the gravity of the situation sank in. The human threat, long thought mere legend, was now all too real. And as the cryo systems on the ancient ship began to fail, the activation sequence initiating after countless millennia, one thing became terrifyingly clear. The humans inside would soon awaken. If the old tales held any truth, the human appetite for conquest and destruction would spell certain doom for the galaxy, for all Nigian kind, if left unchecked. The two scientists stared grimly at each other as alarms blared and pods hissed open in the lab around them. The humans were waking up. Time had run out. They had to act now, or all would be lost. Zoltar shook his head in disbelief as the implications of Yaxa's words sank in. Wait, that can't be right. The humans of legend were supposed to be ruthless, barbaric conquerors who crushed entire star systems beneath their heel. Why would such beings be in cryo-sleep aboard some ancient derelict? Yaxa's eye stalk swiveled towards his colleague. The stories passed down through the generations tell a different tale, Zoltar. The humans were not always the brutal warriors we've come to fear. He pulled up a holographic display, ancient images flickering to life. Millennia ago, when they first ventured into space, humans were much like any other young spacefaring race, curious explorers, eager to learn about the galaxy. The display shifted, showing a sleek human vessel docking with a massive alien station. One day they encountered the Krolak Imperium, the dominant power at that time. The Krolak were intrigued by the humans and welcomed them with open arms, even offering to share their advanced technology. Zoltar leaned in, studying the images intently, and the humans accepted this offer. Gratefully, Yaxa nodded. But it was all a ruse. The Krolak feared the potential of humanity, so they decided to eliminate the humans before we could become a threat. He paused, the weight of his next words hanging heavy in the air. The Krolak invited the human leaders to a grand feast to celebrate their new friendship. And then... Zoltar's eyes widened. They slaughtered them all in a single night of betrayal. Yaxa's head dipped in solemn confirmation. In the same instant, Krolak fleets attacked human colonies without warning or mercy, bombarding worlds into submission. The humans were caught completely off guard, having no reason to suspect such treachery from their supposed friends. The hologram shifted again, displaying a battered fleet of human ships fleeing into the void. In desperation, a group of human refugees fled in a sleeper ship, hoping to escape and one day take vengeance, but they were never seen again, until now. The two scientists turned to stare at the cryopods, the gravity of their discovery hitting home. If these are the descendants of those refugees, and they awaken, Yaxa's voice dropped to a whisper, the galaxy will burn. Zoltar's eye stalk squinted with skepticism. Even if this tale of the Krolak betrayal is true, surely the humans would have put such ancient grudges behind them by now. It's been millennia. No species could hold on to a desire for vengeance that long. Yaxa shook his head solemnly. You underestimate the depth of human wrath, Zoltar. The legends say that in the aftermath of the Krolak treachery, the surviving humans swore a blood oath. They vowed to avenge their fallen kin and conquer the galaxy so that no other race could ever threaten them again. Yaxa's voice dropped to a hush. It said they spent centuries in exile, single-mindedly dedicating themselves to honing their combat prowess and plotting their revenge. Their fury was so great, rumors claimed they even turned on each other in a ruthless pursuit of strength. They culled any perceived weakness from their own kind through brutal blood sports and gladiatorial combat. Only the most cunning and violent of their species were permitted to breed, spawning new generations more lethal than those before. "That's ridiculous superstition," Zoltar scoffed. "No race could be that barbaric and still hope to survive, much less rise to become an interstellar power." Yaxa fixed him with a grim stare. "You forget the legendary Battle of Krolak Prime. Human forces supposedly carved a swathe of destruction across the planet, systematically exterminating Krolak soldiers, civilians, even hatchlings, with a zeal that terrified the galaxy. They left no survivors." Yaxa's voice was barely a whisper now. "In the end, the humans burned the Krolak homeworld to ashes, as a warning to all other races. You've seen the ruins on Krolak Prime yourself. The radiation signatures match no known weapons." Zoltar's eye stalks widened as Yaxa pressed on. "According to our histories, the Krolak were the most advanced civilization of their era, yet they were utterly destroyed, their mighty empire reduced to dust. Who else but the humans could have defeated them so completely? Who else would be capable of such ruthlessness?" The two Nigins turned to stare at the cryopods, dread coiling in their guts as the magnitude of the threat before them became clear. Zoltar's voice was hoarse. "You're saying that if these humans wake up, if the old legends are true—" Zoltar nervously tapped his claws on the console, his mind reeling as Yaxa revealed the humans' bloody history of conquest. He forced himself to ask the question gnawing at him. What happened to the humans after they destroyed the Krolak? Yaxa's eye stalks drooped. "Our histories say that following their vengeance, the humans set out to subjugate the rest of the galaxy. They were determined to ensure their own supremacy and prevent any future threats to their power." He pulled up a star map, indicating swathes of territory. Over the next several centuries, they rapidly expanded, annexing or destroying countless worlds and civilizations. Entire species were wiped out or enslaved as the humans tightened their grip on the galaxy. Zoltar studied the map, his heart pounding. No one could stop them. "Not until they reached the Vana'ar," Yaxa said. He zoomed in on a small, unremarkable planet. The Vana'ar were primitive compared to the humans, centuries behind technologically, but they were cunning and tenacious. "How could primitives resist the human juggernaut?" Zoltar asked incredulously. "Guerrilla tactics," Yaxa explained. "Traps, ambushes, hit-and-run attacks. The Vana'ar bled the human forces dry in a grueling ground war, despite their technological inferiority." Zoltar leaned forward. "What did the humans do?" Yaxa's voice was grim. The human commander, enraged by his inability to quickly subjugate the Vana'ar, ordered his ships to bombard the planet from orbit, to kill everything on the surface. "Genocide," Zoltar whispered, "to erase their humiliation." Yaxa nodded solemnly. But the Vana'ar had one final trick up their sleeve, an experimental weapon that caused a chain reaction in the human ship's power cores. His eye stalks swiveled to Zoltar. In a blinding flash, the human fleet was vaporized. The commander, the best of his troops, all gone. The power of the human war machine, broken at last. Zoltar let out a slow breath. Surely that was the end of the human threat then. Yaxa shook his head. The humans were reeling from the catastrophic loss, but they weren't broken. The remaining forces regrouped, called for reinforcements from the human homeworld. He paused, his voice dropping. But none came. The human planet had gone mysteriously silent. "What do you mean, silent?" All communication ceased. The humans, fearing a trap but honor-bound to investigate, reluctantly pulled forces back from the front lines. They sent scouts to their home planet to investigate. Yaxa's eye stalks fixed on Zoltar intensely. What those scouts found, if the stories are true, chilled them to their very bones. Zoltar's own eye stalks were wide. What did they find? The human homeworld as Earth, it was a graveyard. The cities were nothing but crumbling ruins. Yaxa's voice was barely a whisper. Their entire species had been wiped out. Some unknown calamity had scoured their planet clean. Zoltar struggled to process this revelation. So the human explorers we found, they still are the last remnants of their kind, Yaxa finished grimly. And if they wake up, if they realize they're all that's left. He left the dire implications hanging unsaid in the air between them. The two scientists turned to stare at the cryopods, a new level of dread twisting their insides. The fate of the galaxy itself hung in the balance. Yaxa paused for a moment, his eye stalks drooping with the weight of the tale. Zoltar leaned forward, his own eyes wide with a mix of fear and morbid fascination. "So what did the humans do next?" Zoltar asked, his voice hushed. Yaxa shook his head slowly. Devastated and directionless, the few surviving humans made a fateful decision. They knew that without their homeworld's resources, rebuilding their civilization would be a near impossible task. So they turned to the one thing that had always sustained them: vengeance. Zoltar's eye stalks twitched. Vengeance against whom? Everyone, Yaxa said grimly. The humans resolved that when they awoke from cryosleep, they would not rebuild, they would destroy. They vowed to finish what they started millennia ago, scouring the galaxy of all other life as penance for their own failure. A chill ran down Zoltar's exoskeleton. By the stars, how could they hope to accomplish such a thing? Yaxa's voice dropped to a whisper. They constructed a massive automated shipyard powered by the energy of an entire star. They programmed it to continuously build warships in their absence, amassing an arsenal for the day when they would return to unleash Armageddon upon the galaxy. Zoltar's heart pounded in his thorax. An entire star, the energy output would be unfathomable. Such a shipyard could produce fleets to darken the skies of 1,000 worlds. Yaxa nodded solemnly. The humans left a recorded message detailing their plan. Then the surviving explorers vanished into the void of space, never to be seen again, until... His eye stalks swiveled to the cryopods, the implications hanging heavy in the air. Zoltar swallowed hard, then asked the question burning in his mind. What became of this shipyard? Surely if it existed, we would know of it. Yaxa's expression turned even graver. About a century ago, long-range Nigerian probes detected an anomaly, a star that seemed to be dimming at an unnatural rate. Further scans revealed its mass was being slowly siphoned away by some colossal structure encircling it. Zoltar's eyes widened in shock. The human shipyard, it's real, it's still active. The Nigerian Science Council sent an expedition to investigate, Yaxa continued. But as soon as their ship dropped out of warp near the star, it was set upon by some sort of automated defense system, powerful beam weapons, the likes of which we'd never seen. The ship barely escaped intact. Yaxa's voice quivered slightly as he recounted the tale. Only fragments of heavily damaged transmissions made it back to Nigeria, garbled warnings like, "Stay away, shipyard active, preparing for master's return." It was enough to chill the blood of even the most skeptical counselors. Zoltar gripped the edge of the console, his claws leaving scratches in the metal. What did the council do with this information? What could they do? Yaxa shrugged helplessly. They knew the human legends. If word got out that those ancient tales of destruction were more than mere myths, it could incite mass panic on a galactic scale. Trillions of citizens looking to the skies in terror, dreading the day humanity's wrath would rain down upon them. Yaxa shook his head. No, the council decided it was better to suppress the truth. They declared the star's coordinates a restricted sector and forbade any further attempts to explore it. Only the highest echelons of government were quietly briefed on the potential threat. Zoltar looked back at the cryopods, the sleeping humans now cast in a far more sinister light. If they were to wake up now, with their shipyard still churning out war fleets. He met Yaxa's gaze, seeing his own horror reflected in his colleagues' eyes. There was no more doubt, no more room for skepticism. The human threat was all too real, and it was now up to the two of them to decide the fate of the galaxy. Zoltar's eye stalks twitched with agitation. Yaksa, if you've had access to this information for so long, why are you only now revealing it? The Council should have been informed immediately. Yaksa's shoulders slumped. He sighed heavily. I know, Zoltar, believe me, I've agonized over this decision for years, but you have to understand the position I was in. He began to pace, his claws clicking against the cold metal floor. When I first stumbled upon those records, I was just a young researcher, driven by an insatiable hunger for knowledge. I had no idea what I was getting into. Yaksa's voice dropped to a conspiratorial whisper. As I dug deeper, piecing together the fragmented accounts, a chilling picture began to emerge. The humans were real, Zoltar, and they were far more terrifying than even our worst nightmares. He shuddered, his eye stalks drooping. The ancient documents spoke of them in tones of awe and dread. They described a race of relentless conquerors, possessed of a technology and a fury beyond anything our galaxy had ever seen. Yaksa paused, his gaze distant. And then there were the whispers about the shipyard, a monstrous construct powered by the very lifeblood of a star, churning out warships for the day when the humans would return to claim their vengeance. He turned to face Zoltar, his expression haunted. I became obsessed, Zoltar. I had to know the truth. I spent years scouring every scrap of data I could find, searching for any sign that the humans might still be out there. Zoltar's own eye stalks widened in realization. And you couldn't risk the Council shutting down your research. Yaksa nodded grimly. Exactly. If they were willing to suppress knowledge of the shipyard expedition, who knows how they would react to someone challenging their official narrative. I couldn't take that chance. He gestured to the cryopods, the sleeping humans within. But now, with this discovery, everything has changed. This is the proof I've been searching for, Zoltar. Proof that the humans existed, and that their technology was advanced enough to keep them alive for millennia. Yaksa gripped Zoltar's shoulders, his claws digging in with urgency. Don't you see? If the stories are true, if that shipyard is still out there, then the humans could have an entire armada waiting for them when they wake up. He released Zoltar, his expression grim. We have to warn the Council, Zoltar. We have to make them understand the magnitude of the threat we're facing. Because if we don't prepare, if we're not ready when the humans return... Yaksa's voice trailed off, the unspoken implications hanging heavy in the air. He met Zoltar's gaze, a newfound determination burning in his eyes. Zoltar's claws tapped nervously against the console as he processed Yaksa's dire warnings. The weight of their discovery pressed down on him like a physical force. So, what do we do now? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Yaksa's eye stalks swiveled to meet Zoltar's gaze. Our first priority must be to secure this ship and its cryopods. If the humans inside wake up unsupervised... He let the implication hang in the air for a moment before continuing. We need to assemble a team of trusted colleagues. Quietly. We can't risk word of this getting out before we're ready. Zoltar nodded slowly. A team to study the humans, to learn their capabilities and intentions. Precisely, Yaksa confirmed. If we can understand what drives them, we may be able to find a way to negotiate, or at least predict their actions. A thought occurred to Zoltar, and he hesitated before voicing it. But if the humans are as dangerous as the stories claim, wouldn't it be safer to simply destroy the cryopods? Eliminate the threat before it can emerge? Yaksa's eye stalk snapped to Zoltar, his expression aghast. Destroy them? We can't condemn an entire species based on ancient legends. He shook his head vehemently. No, we have a moral obligation to at least try to communicate with them before resorting to violence. Yaksa's voice softened as he added, Besides, if we kill them, we'll never know the truth about what happened all those years ago. We'll be throwing away a chance to learn from the mistakes of the past. Zoltar, though unconvinced, conceded the point with a slight dip of his eye stalks. I suppose you may be right. He drummed his claws on the console thoughtfully. But we also need to start thinking about how to protect our own society. If the worst should happen, if the humans do turn out to be as ruthless as the stories claim, then we'll need to be ready to defend ourselves, Yaksa finished, nodding grimly. It's a fine line we'll have to walk, between preparing for war and trying to prevent it. He glanced back at the cryopods, the sleeping humans within. But first we need to get to that ship. Every moment we delay, we risk someone else finding it. Yaksa's voice dropped to a grave whisper, or the humans waking up on their own. A piercing alarm shattered the tense silence, jolting Yaksa and Zoltar from their planning. Yaksa leaped to the nearest console, his claws flying across the interface. His eye stalks widened in horror as he took in the security feed. Zoltar, it's the Council's enforcers. Yaksa's voice was tight with fear and urgency. They're here in the facility, and they're heading straight for the artifact wing. Zoltar let out a string of curses, his own eye stalks swiveling wildly. How did they find out so quickly? We've barely had time to process this ourselves. Yaksa shook his head, his mind racing. Someone must have tipped them off about our discovery, probably hoping to curry favor by being the first to report it. He turned to Zoltar, his expression grim. They're coming to confiscate the ship and the cryopods, Zoltar, and to silence anyone who knows about them. Zoltar's claws clenched. We can't let that happen. If the Council gets their hands on the human, they'll kill them, Yaksa finished bleakly. Bury the truth forever rather than risk the panic that would ensue if word got out. Zoltar paced frantically, his mind whirling. What can we do, Yaksa? We're just scientists. We don't stand a chance against the might of the Council's security forces. Yaksa was silent for a long moment, his eye stalks downcast. Then slowly he looked up at Zoltar. There's only one option, Zoltar. Only one way to ensure the Council can't just sweep this under the rug. He took a deep breath as if steeling himself. We have to wake the humans up. Zoltar recoiled, his claws raised in shock. Are you insane? Unleashing the humans would be madness. You said yourself they could burn the galaxy. Yaksa held up a claw to forestall further protest. I know, Zoltar, believe me, I know. But think about it. If the humans are awake and active, the Council won't be able to just make them disappear. They'll have to acknowledge their existence, deal with them openly. His voice dropped to a whisper. And besides, if the stories are true, if the humans really are as powerful as the legends say, they might be the only ones capable of standing up to the Council. Zoltar stared at Yaksa, his eye stalks quivering with a mix of fear and realization. As much as it terrified him, as much as every instinct screamed that this was madness, he knew Yaksa was right. They didn't have time to evacuate the cryopods, and they couldn't let the Council have them. The humans were their only chance, as slim and desperate a chance as it might be. With a heavy heart, Zoltar nodded. All right, let's do it. Together, they raced through the winding corridors of the lab, the blaring alarms and flashing lights lending a frantic urgency to their every step. They burst into the artifact wing, lungs heaving, and sprinted towards the ancient derelict. Yaksa's claws flew across the unfamiliar controls, his eye stalks flicking from readout to readout, as he tried to make sense of the alien interface. Zoltar stood guard at the entrance, his own claws trembling as he watched for any sign of the approaching enforcers. I'm trying, Yaksa shouted back, desperation lending speed to his movements. This technology, it's beyond anything I've ever seen. I'm not sure. Then, suddenly, a new sound joined the cacophony of alarms, a deep, resonant hum that seemed to emanate from the very heart of the ship. Yaksa stared at the console, his eye stalks wide. That's it. The wake-up sequence. It's initiating. He turned to Zoltar, a mix of awe and terror playing across his features. Let's just hope we're not about to make the biggest mistake in Nigen history. A deep, resonant hum reverberated through the derelict ship as the cryopods cracked open with a hiss of escaping gases. Yaksa and Zoltar watched, hearts pounding, as the first human stirred and slowly sat up. He was an imposing figure, tall and muscular, with piercing blue eyes that seemed to bore into the very souls of the Nigians. The human rose to his feet, his movements fluid and powerful despite his long hibernation. His gaze swept the room, taking in his surroundings with a cool, calculating intensity. When his eyes fell upon Yaksa and Zoltar, his body tensed, his hand instinctively reaching for a weapon that wasn't there. Yaksa, seeing the danger, quickly raised his hands in a placating gesture. "Wait," he cried out, his voice trembling slightly. "We mean you no harm. We woke you to save you from those who would do you harm." The human paused, his brow furrowing as he considered Yaksa's words. "Explain," he demanded, his voice deep and commanding, echoing through the chamber. Yaksa swallowed hard, then launched into a hurried explanation. He told of the Council's enforcers, already on their way to confiscate the ship and the cryopods. He spoke of the legends that had grown around the humans in their absence, the mix of fear and awe with which they were regarded by the galactic community. As Yaksa spoke, the other humans began to emerge from their pods, each as physically impressive as the first. They listened intently, their expressions unreadable as they took in the Nigians' words. When Yaksa finally fell silent, the lead human remained quiet for a long moment, his gaze distant. Then, to the surprise of the Nigians, he laughed, a deep, rich sound that filled the ship. "It seems our reputation precedes us," he said, a wry smile playing across his lips. "And now you wake us, hoping we'll fight your battles for you?" Zoltar started to protest, but the human waved him off. "Relax," he said, his tone almost amused. "I'm not saying we won't help, but we've been asleep a long time. We need to understand this new galaxy we've woken up to before we start another war." He turned to Yaksa, his gaze intense, his blue eyes seeming to pierce through the Nigian's very being. "You said you studied our history. Tell us everything. Leave nothing out. If we're going to fight, we need to know what we're fighting for." Yaksa nodded slowly, a glimmer of hope kindling in his chest. Maybe, just maybe, they could avoid the catastrophe he had feared for so long. He took a deep breath, ready to recount the legends of the humans' past. But before he could begin, the sound of approaching footsteps echoed through the halls outside, the heavy, ominous tread of the Council's enforcers. Zoltar's eye-stalk swiveled towards the door, his body tensing with fear. The final confrontation, it seemed, was about to begin, and the fate of the galaxy hung in the balance. The enforcers burst into the room with weapons drawn, their eyes widening at the sight of the legendary humans standing before them. The lead human stepped forward, his stance relaxed but ready. He held up a hand in a calming gesture. "Stand down," he commanded, his deep voice ringing with authority through the chamber. "We have no quarrel with you." The enforcers hesitated, their weapons still trained on the humans. They exchanged uneasy glances, clearly unnerved by the living legends in their presence. The enforcer leader, a grizzled Nigian with a jagged scar across his snout, snarled at the human. "You are in violation of council law," he growled. "Surrender now, or face the consequences." A cold smile played across the human's lips. "We answer to no one," he said, his voice like steel. "Least of all your council. We will not be prisoners again." Yaksa nodded slowly, disappointment evident in his drooping eye-stalks. "Will you at least consider a peaceful resolution with the council?" he implored. "A war would be devastating for all sides." He fixed Yaksa with an intense gaze. "But perhaps in time your people can learn to stand on their own," he said, "without relying on legends and ghosts to fight for you." With a final nod to the Nigian scientists, the human turned back to face the enforcers. "Let us pass," he commanded. "We're leaving." The lead enforcer opened his mouth to protest, but the human silenced him with a single piercing look. Slowly, reluctantly, the enforcers parted, allowing the humans to stride past them and out of the artifact wing. As the humans disappeared from view, Zoltar let out a shaky breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. "They're going to finish what they started, aren't they?" Yaksa murmured, his eyes fixed on the empty doorway. Zoltar shuddered. "Let us hope that the galaxy is ready for their return," he whispered. An uneasy silence settled over the room as the last of the humans vanished from sight. The enforcers, still stunned by the encounter, slowly lowered their weapons and began to disperse, muttering among themselves. Yaksa and Zoltar were left alone in the chamber, the weight of what they had unleashed hanging heavy in the air. "What have we done?" Zoltar whispered, his voice trembling. Yaksa shook his head grimly. "We've changed the course of history," he said. "For better or worse, the humans are back, and the galaxy will never be the same." With a final glance at the now empty cryopods, Yaksa turned and walked away, Zoltar following close behind. The future was uncertain, but one thing was clear. The legends of the humans were no longer just stories. They were a reality, and the Nigians, and indeed the entire galaxy, would now have to reckon with the consequences of their return. You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.